What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Recher podcast. Happy Monday to you and yours. Hope everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving weekend. I know I sure as hell did, up with my family. I've been sick as a dog the last couple of days, but feeling much better because it is a Victory Monday here on the Recher podcast. Make sure you follow me on all social media platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok. I am everywhere. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Plenty to get into on the program today. You know, I'm always going to bring the heat when it comes to the guests. Nathan Bond, Bay Area Examiner. We're going to talk about all things USF at 12:20. 12:45, Gus Malzahn. Did he really leave UCF to become the offensive coordinator at Florida State? Oh, my God. What is going on there in O-Town? Brandon Kravitz will join us at 12:45. 1 o'clock, Jim Costa up in Detroit. He's got everything on Michigan, on the Detroit Lions, what's going on with the Eyes are playing with the Red Wings. Matt Matera from Pewter Report at 1:20 to talk about the Buccaneers. Big win over the Panthers. And then Eddie Encina from the Tampa Bay Times, the latest on the Tampa Bay Lightning, including an injury update for Nikita Kucherov. But we start our Mondays the only way we know how, with our good friend Ian Beckles. We got to tell him every single week to turn the phone sideways. But listen, so first off, happy Thanksgiving. Everybody sends their love from the NY.
Same to you, brother. Same to you.
My mom's like sitting over here FaceTiming me 5 minutes before the show. Come on, mama, you know that. You know better. But I was thinking to myself before the show today, I go, man, if you were affiliated with Ian Beckles at all in football, you had a good weekend. With Indiana beating Purdue, I know you felt good about that one. The Eagles, that's a good win for the Eagles over the Baltimore Ravens, and the Buccaneers winning over the Carolina Panthers yesterday. If you're any way involved with Ian Beckles in the football world, you had yourself a pretty nice weekend.
Well, the Eagles can suck it, but the Buccaneers, got a little lucky yesterday, as you saw, and my Indiana Hoosiers, I wouldn't say that's luck. 66-0. I don't think that's luck. Hey, look, the rivalry games didn't really work. The last thing I did in college, since I was a captain for the Hoosiers, me and Anthony Thompson had to walk over the old Oaken Bucket into the Purdue locker room and give it to them, and they beat us to knock us out of bowl contention and out of a Heisman. So to watch my Hoosiers demolish them 66-0 was fun.
I feel like this year for Indiana has been such like it's almost like a healing season for you, right? All the years you'd have to go and you wonder like, hey, you have one good week or one big upset, but just this whole year, I mean, I feel like it's been very therapeutic for you and your Hoosier brethren.
Well, Jay, you know me enough to I'm a realist. Like I'm not like Aaron Jacobson, where every year the Mets are going to win, and every year the Knicks are going to win, and every year the Jets are going to win, and they never win. So I'm a realist, and my Hoosiers have been 4-0. And when I look at your Hoosiers, I'm like, take it easy, wait to see. Then they get to the Big Ten, and they end up losing, 7 of 8. So this year, about the 5th game of the season, I go, this is a little bit different because they were mollywopping people, and they were playing offense, defense. Their coach is cocky as can be in a lovable way, and I've enjoyed this year. It's been great.
Yeah, it's funny. You told me very early on this year. I'm really early. You were like, they're going to beat Michigan. And I was like, okay. I mean, you beat the defending national champions. And listen, we know they're not the same team as last year, but still, you see it in the game against Ohio State. I'm going to ask you about that. What'd you think about that big upset where Michigan beats Ohio State? It just seemed like, as you've been telling me for many years, they were winning the battle in the trenches, Ian.
Well, I put money on Michigan, okay, because I watched Indiana play Michigan and I watched Indiana play Ohio State. Indiana beat Michigan, although they didn't win in the trenches, okay? They won despite that. Ohio State beat the crap out of Indiana in the trenches. And I just thought that Michigan matched up better in the trenches, and they did. And when you have a locker room full of people who have never lost to Ohio State, if you don't think that's a big deal, you're crazy. Like, they thought they were going to win that game. So I just thought that Michigan is not a better team than Ohio State. They just thought they were going to win that game, and they figured it out.
What do you make of like the flag planting on the field and that whole thing? Because we know with college football, you just mentioned with Purdue, it's all about rivalries, right? And we know Baker Mayfield, right? He planted the flag for Oklahoma right there in the middle of the O there at the Horseshoe years ago. What do you make of that whole thing? Do you think it's over the line? I mean, we saw it too with like Florida and Florida State. Mike Norvell's freaking out Part of me looks at it as like, yeah, I could do without it. It is what it is, because you don't see the Ravens and the Steelers, who I think is one of the biggest rivalries, and they're not coming to fisticuffs at the end of the game, and that doesn't take away from the game. But college football is different, so I see both sides of this. Where do you fall on that?
I'm solely on one side. I'm about sportsmanship. Okay, that's where I came from. I coached Chamberlain football this year, and Boca Ciega beat the crap out of us in the playoffs. And I have a video of one of their players spitting on 3 of our players. Okay, so you're gonna beat the crap out of somebody, then spit on them. Like, I just don't understand that. You already beat the crap out of somebody on the field. That should be enough. But you don't have to plant something somewhere, because, Jay, you know me, I don't overreact on something. But on everything I love, if you plant something on my field, I'm coming. I'm just telling you. If you try to plant something in the middle of my field, I'm running full bore at somebody, and somebody's getting laid out. Maybe I'm wrong for that, but that's the way I was built. If you beat me, for God's sakes, don't disrespect me. Remember LeGarrette Blount popping old boy in the face? I got that. I understood it. If you whoop me, don't come up in my face talking crap. You're about to get dealt with. So I hated the way it ended. I really did. But I understand. I just thought that the planting on somebody else's field is just unnecessary for me. How can it end well? They're not going to let you do it. So when you do it, you're just really inciting a riot. And there's a bunch of people getting tased and, pepper sprayed. It's all it's stupid. It's meaningless.
Yeah, I don't think it adds really much anything to it. But, it is what it is, right? It's not going to like quelch any of the bad vibes. There could already be fisticuffs after the game without that, right? So college football games are
guarantees fisticuffs.
Yeah, you're just throwing a whole bunch of lighter fluid on there. Something came up on my Facebook memories the other day, and it was when we used to do our halftime heats, and you and I used to write down these certain things that we didn't get into topic A or B, and mine was like the top 10 teams that people hated the most. And it was, of course, the Yankees were on there, the Cowboys, the Lakers, and teams like that. But yours was something about Baker Mayfield. And ironically enough, it was about him in Cleveland. And you and I went back and forth. And even going into this year, I still was kind of lukewarm on whether Baker Mayfield is a good enough quarterback to be able to lead the Buccaneers, not just to a Super Bowl, but to win a Super Bowl. And I think your halftime heat was something about like Baker not having the it factor. And, I think we've learned a lot about Baker Mayfield that we probably didn't know looking from afar. Like, we know a lot more about him, and I think that happens a lot. And maybe it was, and I know maybe for me, you look at him, maybe lump him in with Johnny Manziel, you maybe lump him in with like, all right, a guy that was drafted too high. But would you say that he does have that it factor now that we've learned more about him, or is there still reservation? Is there still like, hey, the judgment is out? Because, as good as he has played for the Buccaneers, really doesn't mean anything unless you take him back to the promised land.
I don't think he's played all that great the last couple games, okay? Maybe 3 games. That being said, your question is, do I think he has it? Undoubtedly. No doubt in my mind. There's no doubt in my mind. Listen, I've been in sports radio a long time. I said a lot of things. I made a lot of predictions. I can say I was wrong about Baker Mayfield. I'm okay with that. Like, I remember saying, listen, Baker Mayfield has good film, but it's been a while.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So for us to just say we're going to be okay with Baker Mayfield is a little bit much. So let's wait and see. I wasn't excited about Baker Mayfield coming here. He just been on 3 different teams. Nothing ever worked. I don't think I ever questioned his competitive nature, but I think that's what makes him great. I really do. I think that's what got him in trouble early in his career as a young football player. Now he's an older football player with the same competitive nature. He makes somewhat better decisions, although he's still kind of that rebel type of cat. But there's no doubt in my mind that Baker Mayfield makes people in that huddle better. And that's all you really want your quarterback to do. Do I think he's good enough to win the Super Bowl? Yes. But the Buccaneers got to be way better around him than they are right now.
You got that right. I want to shout out to our guy, Coach Ward, from out there in Armwood. Great to see the big man joining the program. Great season this year at Chamberlain. That's a lot of love from Coach Ward over there at Armwood. Jake Kobe and checking in. What's up? Happy Victory Monday. Shout out to Anthony Nelson for saving the season. Ian, that is a guy right there. And you've told me about this, and it's kind of ironic. Will Golston's very similar, right? There's guys like this on a football team where if you look at their stats, you're going, I don't see it. But if you watch the tape, this is what Anthony Nelson does. He had a sack last year at the end of the game. He's just a guy that he's only going to play a certain percentage of the snaps. He's not a starter, but he's a rotational pass rusher that's going to give you everything he's got, and he's going to come up with plays like this that are going to put your team in a position to win. It looked like the Buccaneers were going to blow that game last night, and here comes Anthony Nelson, strips the ball away from Hubbard. Yaya comes up, they go back down the field, and then they end up winning the game. But just speak about a guy like Anthony Nelson and a role like that, what that guy has on a team like the Buccaneers.
Well, Anthony Nelson seems to come up with those big plays, and some guys they have a propensity to do that. Some other guys don't. All right. I like to see more from our ends personally. Okay. But Yaya Diaby made a couple of big plays. Obviously, Anthony Nelson made a big play, so you can't complain about it. The meat and potatoes of our defense is on the inside. I think we all know that. But just imagine we had two rushers on the outside with Kalijah Kancey and Vita Vea on the inside. That's going to be amazing. And I guess we thought Yaya was going to be that guy. He hasn't been that guy, although I'm not disappointed with Yaya. I'm disappointed when I watch JTS play. I'm disappointed in lack of effort at times. And I don't know if it's lack of effort or lack of nasty. I always see Yaya playing hard. So I just don't have a problem. Shaq Barrett used to play real hard, but he wouldn't get sacks, and he wasn't getting the production. So I don't have a problem with Yaya because eventually it's going to come, but we need to start getting a little bit more out of our ends. But Nelson, to me, he there's something about him in big plays, and you need players like that. Will Golston is kind of like that lunchbox type of guy, but he doesn't make the same big plays as Nelson does.
Right. I want to ask you about Graham Barton. I thought yesterday was probably he was just struggling penalties, and it just seemed like one of those games where you're going to have games like that where he's a rookie center. But when you have games like that, you just want to see him stay with it and keep pushing. What did you notice from the young rookie out of there rocking the 6'2"? Because I just felt like you're going to have to live with games like that when you have a guy in his first year in that position.
Well, every time I hear holding 62, it gives me goosebumps. But I'm going to say this about Barton. This is week 13, something like that, and I don't really remember him having a bad game. I don't, there's been a couple plays here and there. I watched the games with Tony Mayberry, and I would go to Tony if I had a question about centers. If there's questions about centers, anybody in this city, I would go to Tony. Okay, right. So Tony knows what he's talking about, and he'll just point out a couple things what the young kid is doing wrong. When I see rookie guards, I could be pointing them out as well. It hasn't been glaringly bad. Yesterday, I heard his name quite a few times. Football's about matchups. Sometimes you don't match up well against some people. As long as he rebounds and comes back, he hasn't played worse than Cody Mauch. Okay, and he's a rookie. Cody Mauch, I like the way he fights, but sometimes his film's not pretty. And I really truly believe that, and I hope Liam Cohen is listening to me. You guys took a step forward as far as culture goes yesterday. Don't take a step back, because there was a couple situations yesterday, especially when Baker came in 3rd and 1. Run the freaking ball. What do we play actioning and throw a pick for in that situation? Your quarterback just got knocked out of the game. They got two running backs that are both averaging 6.1 yards a carry. Run the gosh darn ball. And Liam Cohen said he speaks to his father all the time, and his father always says, run the ball. Liam, run the ball. Period.
How great is Mark Schlereth calling those games? He's one of my favorites.
I'm so happy you said that, Jay, because in the middle of the game, I go, is that stink? Like, I remember Schlereth from Denver, and our lockers were next to each other. What a good, cool dude. Just an everyday, like this. He was so beat up. I watched him walk around the locker room, and I go, why are you still playing? And he goes, what do you mean? And I go, how many knee surgeries you had? He was like, 34. And I go, why are you still playing? He goes, because I got to replace my whole body at the end anyway, so I might as well keep going. And it was the craziest, most realistic thing I ever heard in my life. But Schlereth, to me, does as good as anybody in announcing. I don't care for announcers too much, but offensive linemen, they see things a little bit different, and we're just a little bit smarter than everybody else, too.
And he loves the game. You can tell, like, he loves the meat and potatoes. He loves the nitty gritty. He shows love to both teams. It's never a bias. He looks at the plays, and he looks at guys that are just grinding out there and maybe don't get the same type of love and the same type of attention as like the skill players, the guys on the outside, the quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. He's always highlighting things that, we usually talk about when we're at your place, right? Before I let you go, I want to ask you what a win like yesterday means for the Buccaneers as far as, the grit and the tenacity. I don't know if you learned so much about this Buccaneers team in a win against the lowly Giants, but you kind of knew yesterday was going to be one of those funky games. It was a 4:00 start in Carolina. It's starting to get colder. They weren't, sharp. They weren't on their P's and Q's. I thought you learned a lot about the mettle, about the desire, about what the character of this Buccaneers team was in a game like that, beating a team like the Carolina Panthers, because they're not the team that everybody thought they were going to be. This is a team that was a possession away from beating the Chiefs last week. Let's not forget that. How important was that victory, and what did that tell you about this Todd Bowles-led club?
Well, listening to, like sports radio and everybody speaking about it this morning, everybody is disappointed. I couldn't be further from disappointed. I mean,
I agree.
You played, I'm not going to say terrible, but you didn't play well. That's for sure. I mean, from 1 to 10, the Bucs played 5.5. And they won a football game on the road against a division team who was actually playing pretty good football. Dave Canales, every time a coach comes on board, doesn't matter who it is, when they have new systems, it takes a while for them, everybody to catch themselves. Carolina was starting to catch themselves a little bit. I think the broadcast, for sure, for me, gassed up Bryce Young too damn much. Like, this guy was doing some Mahonian kind of crazy stuff. He just played a little below average for me, okay? And to me, I didn't think there was very good quarterback play on either side of the ball all this year. Yesterday. But to me, the Buccaneers look back at that. You make the corrections. You can fall back on making big plays defensively. You can fall back on running the football. We need to get way more out of our number 2 and number 3 wide receivers. Kate Otton's got to wake up again. We're not going to beat a good football team the way we played offensively or defensively yesterday. Defensively, we got to figure out ways to get to that quarterback, because we're letting young quarterbacks be, too comfortable back there. But I think as a whole, if you're a Buccaneer fan, you have to be elated with that win, because we were one play away from our season being over. That season was over, you lose to Carolina, and now we're right in the thick of things.
Check him out on all social media platforms at Ian Beckles. Don't forget to check out In the Trenches. You want to find out what is going on with this Buccaneers team with no type of, soft stuff. He's going to give it to you straight. My man, Ian Beckles. I appreciate you, brother. I'm glad that you're doing well. The hoodie looks phenomenal. Even John Momola checking in, really digging that hoodie from Ian. Yeah, man. Yeah, sharp as attack. Make sure you go check them out. Dignitary Tea and Kava House, 4817 Southwest.
4817 Southwest Show. You got it.
Boom, baby. I appreciate you, brother. I'll talk to you later on this week.
I love Kid.
All right, buddy. The one and only Ian Beckles, man. Love chatting with him. Nobody better than my man Ian Beckles. Yeah, check him out on all social media platforms. Yeah, what a win for the Buccaneers yesterday. I really enjoyed that game. I'm with you. I'm not disappointed at all with that Buccaneers game. I'm not. People are always looking through it like every single game is going to be perfect. They're not. Every game is not going to be perfect. Who gives a flying shit? I don't care. Win the game, right? I understand that you got to look at the process, and we'll talk more about process here momentarily. Nathan Bond is going to join us. We'll talk about Alex Golish and the process, but it's about results. You're not always going to have your A game. You're going to have your 5.5 game, like Ian just said. But can you make enough plays to win the damn game? Christian Izzian was getting torched early on in that game. He got progressively better. Same thing for Graham Barton. For all the talk about Todd Bowles and his defense, it's bend but don't break. He makes sure that when you're in the red zone, you're going to have an awfully tough time getting 6 against that Buccaneer defense. So shout out to the Bucs. It's not always going to be pretty. It's not always going to be a freaking Picasso, but I could give 2 craps as long as you come out on top and you win the game. All right, let's bring in our good buddy, Nathan Bond, Bay Area Examiner. Let's talk some USF football, USF everything. Nate, what's going on, buddy? How are you?
What's going on, man? Excited to be on. Appreciate you, reaching out.
Yeah, of course, man.
Wish better circumstances, I guess. So, over the weekend.
Listen, slide the camera down a little bit. We got to see your whole body. There you go, man. There you go. Look at this sharp dressed man over here, brother.
Yeah,
Look at this
I gotta
guy.
keep it. I gotta keep it fly for the professional job.
I hear you, buddy. All right, let's get right into it. USF and Beatrice. It's this the crazy thing about this USF team, right? You think you kind of got a finger on the pulse of what they're about, what they're going to do. And then you have a game like this where it's just like, all right, here comes back the slow starts. They fight their way back, but Nate, they come up short again. Just what's your overall impression with how this season ended for Alex Golish and the Bulls?
Could have been better.
Right.
I think there's a lot of missed opportunities for this team, but uh, overall, this is kind of what I figured this team would be heading into the season. If you told me this team would be 6-6, like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The first 6 games were really tough, and they went 2-4. And then you didn't think Navy would be as good as they were.
Right.
You kind of chalk that up as a loss that, once the season gets kind of going. But man, dropping this Rice game when they were terrible, interim head coach and EJ Warner just dotted this defense up for 4 quarters. And he had thrown 13 interceptions going into the game. He was good for at least one or two, and their losses, he looked awful, and you just couldn't get him uncomfortable enough to even think about throwing you an interception. And it
What do you think
snowballs
about
from
that?
there.
I want to ask you about that defense because at times we've seen good, at times we've seen really bad. Is it because the cupboard was very bare on that side of the ball for the last couple of years? How much of this do you put on Coach Orlando? How much do you put on it that they don't seem like they have a bunch of horses on that side?
Yeah, it's not about the X's and O's, Jimmys and Joes, or what
Right.
win you football games. And there's some positions that are lacking. I don't think Jalen Schuler looked right after his knee injury. I thought he looked slow at times. Now, if you look at me, I'm always slow all the time. But comparatively, what he looked like last season, the early part, the first game of the season before he got hurt, he looks like a different guy. And Rice was able to take advantage of him specifically in coverage. Teams this season have been able to take advantage of him in coverage one-on-one against their running backs, and it has not been a recipe for success. I do think they kind of telegraph when they're blitzing. They usually play zone behind a blitz, and if the blitz doesn't get home, you can just get picked apart, and that's
Right.
kind of what happens in the losses.
Yeah, and listen, the defense is what it is, and hopefully that's something that'll improve over the year, or over till next season too. This is a bowl game; they're going to be in a bowl game. I saw some people online saying that they should like forfeit their way; they don't deserve to go to a bowl game. I mean, what kind of message does that send to the Kelly Joiners of the world, the Sean Atkins of the world, and also the recruits coming in? Where hey, come play for us, and you could blood, sweat, and tears for 3 or 4 years. You have an opportunity to play one more game, but you know what? Because we didn't deserve it, we're going to back out of it. That's probably one of the biggest loser type of
It,
mindset mentality BS that I have ever seen. Please tell me I'm not crazy for having that
no, you're
idea.
not crazy. You're
Okay,
not
thank
crazy
you.
at all. I think this is uh, the breeding ground for the online Twitter thugs, right? Like
Right.
most of the time, it's behind some weird, avatar. It's not actually them. They're mad to be mad for no reason. And like, listen, I've over the course of my 8 years, I think yesterday was 8 years officially being the managing editor of either the Bay Area Examiner or the Daily Stampede. Before it, I've called for head coaches to be fired when it was time. And the fact that these people are freaking out over 500 over 2 years, Alex Golish,
Right.
screams entitlement from this fan base that frankly they don't deserve. And I'll put me in there because I am a diehard USF fan. We I don't get where the entitlement comes from. We were number 2 in the nation in 2007 for 4 days before they lost to Rutgers. This team has not consistently put together competent conference seasons. Yeah, you get your big ones against Florida State, Notre Dame. Awesome, great job. You compete against Alabama the last couple of years. but they don't win conference games. They don't win the games that matter. And it's not just an Alex Golesh thing. It's a program historic thing. Jim Leavitt was the same way. You would win the big September games. The team would crumble in October. Skip Holtz, Willie Taggart, Charlie Strong, Jeff Scott didn't win anything.
Yeah.
So and so I get the frustration that people think this team should be better. But when you look around the conference and we're exactly where USF is supposed to be. If they were any better, they'd be in a better conference, but you're not. So here you are, deal with it.
Yeah, and this is a big part of it too. And shout out to our guy, Coach Ward over at Armwood. USF QB was out and missed games that hurt them.
Okay.
I gotta be very careful with how I pose this question. What do you make of how Alex Golesh and USF has handled the Byron Brown situation? Because I don't necessarily know if it gave them any type of competitive advantage by keeping everything so close to the vest. Bryce Archie is what he is. And I want to talk about Izzy Carter, but save that for the next question. But the fact that it didn't seem like they were very transparent when it comes to the Byron Brown situation. What do you make of that? And do you think there's a reasoning behind why Coach Golesh would choose to operate in that sort of fashion?
So, of all the things that Alex Golesh has done in Tampa since he got hired in December of 2022, this is by far his biggest misstep. What's the point? The kid broke a bone in his leg. Let's just call it what it is. Hey, he may be out for the season. If he does come back, awesome. If he doesn't, well, we've kind of planned for this. The cloak and dagger the week after the injury saying, oh, he's been practicing this week for Memphis during the hurricane, the lead up to the hurricane game. No, he wasn't. And then you post pictures of him in a boot and then also on the scooter because he broke his leg and you can't really put pressure on it. And then you have the social media team take down the post because you weren't really supposed to see that Byron Brown was in a boot on a scooter. It was just one misstep after another from the staff on this particular situation. I think they've done a great job recruiting. They've made, lemonade out of lemons quite a bit. But man, they could have handled this a lot better. Talking to folks around the program after the Memphis thing, I was like, "You really? We're gonna call it that he's been practicing?" And they're like, "Yeah, I don't know if we should have said that, but here we are." And I think I put it out on Twitter Sunday night, Saturday night. Basically, if you handle this situation better, I think the fans adjust their expectations of this team a little bit better because there's not this cloud of, okay, well, maybe he'll play this week. Oh, maybe he'll play this week. And it kind of adjusts the expectations. I mean, they are who we thought they were. They were kind of mid sometimes.
It's another thing too. If Bryce Archie is lighting the world on fire, right? But he's inaccurate passer. He's not the same guy. I love the effort, right? The guy is doing everything he can. The offense really didn't suit him the first couple of weeks. He's not the same guy. He's more of a traditional pocket passer. To run that same kind of offense, the RPOs, you're not fooling anybody on defense, pretending to hand the football off. And he did have some nice runs, but it's almost like Peyton Manning had some nice runs too in his career because nobody thought he was running the football. I want to ask you about the future of Byron Brown. Do you think he plays in the bowl game, and do you think he enters the transfer portal after the season?
No, and there's a distinct possibility that he enters the transfer portal.
Do you think that had anything to do with them not playing him, or was that strictly because of the injury he couldn't play?
Probably a bit of both. I think they got to the tipping point where, and I asked Golesh about this after senior night against Charlotte. I think it was Charlotte. I can't even remember anymore. Whatever senior night with Tulsa. Basically, what's the calculus on keeping Byram out to have an outside shot at a medical redshirt? And Golesh kind of said, well, he's played in 5 games, played in 4.5. The NCAA is kind of giving out medical redshirts willy-nilly. There's guys on 7th and 8th years. Maybe you take a shot and apply for one. I think it was a business decision. I think he's been clear for a few weeks. At that point, why come back and risk not even being able to apply for medical redshirt at that point?
Right. Now, Izzy Carter is the guy that people have been clamoring for. All right, we've seen what we got from Bryce Archie. Izzy probably is a little bit more like a Byron Brown, if you want to say, like, comparing the two styles of quarterbacks, I guess. How come we haven't seen more of Izzy Carter? Is this just something that Golish isn't a fan of? He doesn't think he's ready, because I think fans, and we've seen it on social media, fans are like, all right, we've seen what Bryce can bring to the table. There seems to be opportunities there for Izzy to get in there outside of when Bryce gets banged up and misses a couple of plays or series or at the end of games. What do you make? How to make heads or tails of the handling of Bryce Archie this year? I mean, excuse me, Izzy Carter this year.
So I will say this about Izzy Carter: he is probably the most talented quarterback in that room. Like, even with Byron, like, you saw it on Saturday. Like, his deep balls are crisp and they kind of shoot out of his arms. Like, they are rockets, and he's very mobile, very athletic, which suits this offense, which is why they went and got him. However, you got to practice that way to be able to get on the field. There, from what I've been told, there's a few instances where he's just not putting in the proper amount of effort week in, week out. Now, I could be being misled, but there was also, he was game a couple weeks ago. I think it may have been the Charlotte game. They go up big. He comes in for a final series in the fourth quarter, runs out of bounds late in the game. Instead of trying to get down, keep the clock running, there's a false start. There's a delay game penalty because he's not in the right spot. They put Bryce Archie back in to finish the game off. But those kind of situations are why Bryce Archie was starting over Izzy Carter. Again, he's still the most talented kid in that QB room, but he's got to be more consistent.
What do you make of the rest of this season, as far as, like, where do you think they're going to go for a bowl game? Do you think guys are going to opt out? Like, how do you see, it's great that they are playing a bowl game. Hell, we went through the Jeff Scott years, but how do you see the next few weeks going, Nathan? Is this going to be kind of like a crescendo, an ascent? We're seeing some of these guys and sending them off on a high note, or do we see, I don't want to say a mass exodus, I think it's a little bit too dramatic, but do we see some guys opt out, transferring? Like, how do you think the next couple of weeks are going to go?
Yeah, I think Cure Bowl or Boca are distinct possibilities for this team. I think if they'd beaten Rice, Hawaii was an option, Frisco, somewhere along those lines, but I don't think that's going to be an option anymore. Probably going to stay locally. As to the mass exodus opt-out question, I don't think we'll see many opt-outs. USF is not at the level where it really matters. Like, frankly, the guys who are leaving are not NFL guys.
Right.
So I don't think you really have to worry about that. Now, to the mass exodus, I think across college football, I know Matt Rule's talked about it in Nebraska. We are going to see so many more players in the transfer portal portaling out, just due to the House, committee, whatever you want, the House resolution, basically stipulating that no more walk-ons, essentially. The SEC did say that they're going to stay at 85 scholarships, 20 walk-ons, basically capping the number on a team at 105. USF, I believe, has 128 guys on their roster. So there's going to be a lot of guys out, and that's more of a trickle-down effect as well. So the P4s are going to go G5s. The lower P4s will go G5, high P4s will go lower P4. Like, we're going to see it on down. There's going to be a few thousand kids without a place to play football next season, or they're going to have to go like NAIA, Division III, Division II, like kind of the lower down FBS you get. It's going to be an interesting December, January, February for a lot of college football teams, not just USF. So I do want to make sure that people know, like, yeah, there's going to be some guys portaling, but over the last couple of years, there haven't been a lot of guys who have entered the portal that the staff was like, dang, I wish he stayed.
Yeah. What do you, real quick before I let you go, what did you think of Gus Malzahn leaving? And I know some people are like, Alex Gorsh is going to go down the road to UCF. I mean, I don't see that happening, but if that
No.
happened, I'm just like, that would be the craziest thing. You want to talk about Bay Area Examiner, more people going to your site than any other
Yeah.
town. That might be it. I don't see it happening, but what do you make of Gus leaving and heading up to Tallahassee?
Like, I don't understand Florida State basically becoming the US government and bailing out UCF from that contract.
Yeah.
Like that was an albatross of a contract for Central Florida, and you basically just give them a get out of jail free card. And over the years, we have the Bay Area Examiner, the Daily Stampede, we have been the strongest proponents that Central Florida has the biggest horseshoe up their butt. It like this, like it makes no sense how they keep getting away with it, and they just got away with another heist. Like how do you let another team that competes in a P4 conference get out of that contract? Like you're
Right.
trying to cripple your in-state rivals. Don't let them out. And I know Mike Norvell and Gus go back to like Tulsa, like 2007, 2006 timeframe, so they know each other. But the game's passed Gus by. What are we doing? You
Right.
had it does make sense. When the team, when the fans of the team that you've poached are happy that you've poached their coach, you made a bad hire.
Exactly. You got that right, my friend. That is good stuff right there. Nathan Bond, the managing editor of the Bay Area Examiner, covering all things USF athletics. Nate, I appreciate it, man. I know you're a very busy guy on this Monday. Always appreciate your time. We'll talk to you again soon, man. Thanks.
Yeah, sounds good. Appreciate it, brother.
All right, buddy. It's a lot to tackle there when it comes to USF. Shout out to Richie P. Jay on the tube, LFG. You got that right, buddy. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave them there at the bottom of the screen, whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. Come on by and get you in on the program. We're going to try to do that more and more as we go live every day in the new year. And I'll give you a start date here coming up in the next couple of weeks. We're going to go Monday and Friday throughout the rest of 2024 and then 2025 every day at noon right here on YouTube if you want to advertise. And I'll have some packages coming out in the next couple of days with the Jay Recher podcast. Feel free to reach out to me on all social media platforms at Jay Recher. Jump aboard. Come along the journey because we are going to be the only live program at noon every day here for you, talking all things Tampa Bay sports and beyond, because there were so many things that went on over the weekend. And whether it's WWE Survivor Series, whether it's Premier League action, Liverpool beating Man City 2-0, City losers of 6 of their last 7 games, Pep Guardiola responding to fans at Anfield, yelling at him, telling him that he's going to be sacked in the morning with a big 6. How many Premier League titles he won, just really, to me, shows signs of sensitivity and a guy that knows that he is on the downslope of his time there at Manchester City. WWE Survivor Series was fantastic on Saturday. War Games, the women's match to start it off, the men's match at the end with CM Punk and Roman Reigns joining forces to defeat the Bloodline 2.0. We'll talk some WWE with our guy Ed Encina from the Tampa Bay Times at 1:40. Of course, the Buccaneers was the big topic of discussion yesterday. I still look back at that game with reverence, and I'm not pissed, and I'm not at all. And people want to get mad at Liam Cohen. What do you think is going to happen with a first-year play caller? And again, your questions, your comments, put them there at the bottom of the screen. I want to hear from you. Your thoughts on the Bucs game yesterday, whether it's Liam Cohen or Todd Bowles, Baker Mayfield. Like, Baker made some mistakes yesterday. It's going to happen. He's got that gunslinger mentality. He's going to make some bad throws. Liam Cohen, how about the 3rd and goal run play where you were pretty much telling everybody that you were running to the left? You had 9,000 offensive linemen and tight ends lined up there. And then you pulled the guard, and then Rachaad White gets stuffed for a 5-yard loss. The game could have been over right there. You get a touchdown right there, kick the extra point, you're up 8, you're in a good spot. Instead, you kick the field goal, Carolina drives back down, they score the touchdown, and then we know what happened from there. But what I want to see from Liam Cohen is some improved play calling in the red zone. We've seen it bite this team in the ass a couple of times. We saw it in the game, I want to say against San Francisco, maybe? Yeah, I think it was that game. He's got to get better in that capacity. It's just the nature of the beast. And you heard Ian say it before at the beginning of the program. 3rd and 1, Baker comes back on the field after Kyle Trask was out there for 2 plays. And you're running a play action pass where Baker throws an interception. Not good enough. But it happens. It happens. People want to get on Todd Bowles, but they just don't seem to hold Liam Cohen's feet to the fire, neither, or a guy like Baker Mayfield. Like, it can't just always be Todd Bowles. Can't. And for all those people that always want to throw Todd Bowles to the wolves every single time something goes wrong with this team, make sure you give him credit too, because a lot less prepared or poorly coached teams would have wilted under the pressure yesterday. You're not going to have your A game. The best teams in football don't always have their A games, but they find a way to win. Look at Kansas City. It has been ugly for them at points this year, but it doesn't matter. It's not style points. It's not college. This is the pros. At the end of the day, they don't look at your strength of schedule and say, well, you did this, you beat this team by 37, you beat this team by 5, you lost to this team by 20. At the end of the day, it's about your record. That's all it's about. Did you win? Did you lose? And like Richie says here, I'm not ever going to complain about a W. Whenever you play in a divisional game, it doesn't matter the record. It is always a tough game. You're right. Throw out the records with some of these games. Throw them out. Jacobian, the same thing. Todd Bowles is far from perfect, but you can't say that this team has ever given up on him, and that's more than you can say for most. Thank you. Thank you very much. Because when you look at this Todd Bowles-led team, when things go wrong in games or things go wrong in the middle of the season, guys are not jumping off the ship. You saw it in New Orleans with Dennis Allen. They didn't want no part of that guy. I'm out of here. You saw it with Frank Reich in Carolina. I'm done. I'm out of here. You haven't seen that. This team has hit the skids 2 years in a row in the middle of the season. Was there any signs of dissension? Were there any talks of people jumping ship and not on board with Todd Bowles? Not one. Maybe from people in local media, maybe from some of the fans. But listen, fan is short for fanatic. You're supposed to ride the highs and despair and go down with the lows. I get that. I can't fault you for being like that. I don't know if it's right in certain situations, but hey, it's your prerogative. But to act like this team doesn't take on the mannerisms and the character of their coach, that even keel mentality, the fact that they don't get too high when things are going great, when they don't get too low when things are going wrong. That's part of the reason why you're able to win a game like you did yesterday. This team does not flinch. This team does not waver. Quarterback goes down, they don't stop. They lose defensive players due to injury, they still battle. Are they going to make mistakes? Yes, they're going to make mistakes. There's going to be blown coverages. There's going to be different things here and there that you're going to look at and say, I wish they did this better. Guess what? You could say that about every single team in the National Football League, including the team that everybody wanted to crown in the offseason. Where's everybody now that was sucking in the teat of the Atlanta Falcons? Oh, look at Kirk Cousins, how great he is. Look at Matthew Judon. Look at these great freaking acquisitions they brought in the offseason. Oh, Kirk Cousins, the guy that threw 4 picks and 0 touchdowns yesterday in a home loss to the Chargers, that Kirk Cousins? Where's everybody now saying how great the Atlanta Falcons were? I don't see him. That looks like one of the better teams in the National Football League. I know they own the tiebreaker against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but can you honestly tell me that the Atlanta Falcons are a better team than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? With a straight face? How many catches did Kyle Pitts have yesterday? As many as me and you. I thought Kirk Cousins was supposed to change that. I didn't really see that. Didn't really see it at all. All right, let's bring in our good buddy Brandon Kravitz from out there down I-4. I was so excited when the news broke yesterday or the day before. I've been sick like the last 2.5 days. I was in New York visiting my family. And for the last couple of days with my nieces and nephews running around like maniacs, you know it being a dad. You know when the kids get crazy like that. And I'm just sitting there and I'm just like, what the hell's going on with Gus Malzahn? Why the hell would he do this? And I go, there's only one person that can answer this question. My guy, Brandon Kravitz. BK, I appreciate you. You're the man. I appreciate it. We'll talk about what you got going on with our guy, Zach Blobner. So excited that you guys are getting together. First off, happy Thanksgiving to you and yours. What was your thought process when the news of Gus Malzahn leaving UCF to take that job at Florida State? It's just never a dull moment in sports, is it?
No, and I have more to work with today than I think I've ever had going into a Monday show. I'm about 2 hours away from showtime myself. And I for the first time in my career, actually made a ranking.
Ooh.
I ranked the topics. I'm at like 10 that I feel like on any given day I could feel really good about opening a show with. It's a good problem to have. There's no chance I get to all of it today. So hopefully you and I can scratch some of these itches here together. But that's definitely the open. You know, when a coach gets fired, that usually zooms to the top of the list. My first thought, do you ever see The Wizard of Oz?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. You know, at the end when the witch dies and those, I don't know what they call the knights that protect her,
right.
castle, they start dancing. They're ding dong, the witches. That's kind of how I felt. It's nothing personal against Gus Malzahn. I've lived through stages of UCF growth.
Right.
I went there in 2005, and I graduated from UCF. I went to UCF games when they didn't have a stadium on campus, and people went to games, backs to the field, don't even know why they were there. I mean, I've seen it all. To go from that to the undefeated season in 2017, followed up with 2018, there was so much momentum that had been built in this program, making it into the Big 12. You made it to the big time, and it felt like Gus Malzahn was driving this bus in reverse. He just wasn't the right guy for the job. I never liked the hire to begin with. It didn't fit the personality of UCF. This is a forward-thinking program. They're sort of the college football disruptor. You know, you think of like those Silicon Valley startups, like that's kind of the vibe that I felt proud of with what UCF had become. And Gus Malzahn was just parachuting in from a stressful job in the SEC to take this one. It just never felt like it was going to work. It stalled out, and I'm glad that the program made the decision that they did. And honestly, and now I have a completely different opinion of Gus. They should probably build a statue for this guy. Tell him to pay his buyout.
It's so funny you say that about the startups. Like for me, UCF is like Shark Tank, Silicon Valley, like they're the sharks, right? And here comes Gus, like an old blowfish, just coming along, moving on all slow, looking around like, oh, that's great. And just goes through. So it seems like the UCF kind of narrative is like, this is kind of solving a problem, right? With him leaving, because it was always a fast offense, multiple running backs, quarterbacks that can do a lot with their, the Mackenzie Milton days and the Dylan Gabriel days. And you're looking around like, oh my God, if you blink, they're going to put up 3 or 4 touchdowns on you. And then here comes Gus, Big 12. You need to almost stay on the precipice of being cutting edge. And now it's a big time step back, but you're looking at this, and I'm sure a lot of other UCF guys are looking at it like this could be, I don't even say a blessing in disguise. This is just a blessing out front.
It's just a blessing because I think they wanted to fire him. And in any other year, even though it's expensive to do so, I think they would have been able to justify it financially. His buyout was $13 million. But the thing is that in today's college football world, if you pay that to a coach, that's money that's not going to build up your roster. Right. And UCF is not at the point where they can – oh, good. They're not at the point yet where they can shoot themselves in the wallet like that. UCF is trending in the right direction. They've made all the right steps over the years. They're not Florida. They're not Florida State. Those programs have been established. Their boosters are wealthier. They have more of them. UCF isn't at that point yet. So they're still trying to fill up the bank account so that they can make those big moves. Like Ohio State can fire Ryan Day, and whatever his buyout is, with ridiculous $20 million or whatever, drop in the bucket for Ohio State. It won't change anything. For UCF, they had to pay Gus Malzahn $13 million not to work. They'd have a really hard time paying players. So yeah, huge blessing because he walks away and doesn't take any of that money. I think he just wanted out of the job because he realized this program doesn't want me. I don't really enjoy this CEO role that it now exists for coaches in college football. it's not like he's an old crusty man. I think he has sort of old ideals in terms of college football, but 60 years old when you've already dealt with almost 10 years at Auburn, disappointing seasons at UCF, where I don't even think he realized how passionate this fan base was when he took the job. It's just like, I think he throws up his hands and says enough. I want to be a coach that calls plays, and I want to be left the hell alone. And that's why he didn't take the buyout.
When I saw this move, and I'm so glad that you do work with the Orlando Magic, you do a great job there. What a story they are. I almost feel like when you look at NBA benches and you see all these former head coaches, they look so happy, right?
Yeah.
They're still there. They're still getting paid. It's usually a bunch of point guards. I feel like I've seen Sam Cassell and Scott Brooks and all these different people on the bench, and they're just chilling. Like, yeah, I love that I don't have to deal with all these personalities. I don't have to draw plays. I can go in there and I can shoot around. And I can just talk shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's
never on the hot seat, Jay.
Ever. So I feel like Gus is like, oh, look what Chip Kelly's doing. Like, you know, I think you're going to see more and more of that, especially at the collegiate level of, I don't want to deal with all of this. If you're telling me I can get a nice cushy job, I can stay for a while, and I can kind of be like a pseudo assistant, associate head coach, and then call plays, whether it's offensively or defensively, I think you're going to see more people take that path of least resistance like Gus Malzahn.
Yeah, and I think Ben Johnson, the OC for the Detroit Lions, hopefully he's listening to us right now, because you might want to heed this warning. You got a good job, man. Don't go running for a job where they're going to hate you in 3 years because you didn't make Caleb Williams the next Patrick Mahomes. I think you're 100% right, and that's, you know, credit to Gus Malzahn. I think it does take a certain life perspective to have your priorities straight, to say, I know that I could earn more money by being properly fired and then sit my ass on the couch and just count my dollars, but I want to enjoy my quality of life. And it's not like being the OC at Florida State is going to put you on the street begging for dollars. So it's credit to him for realizing that. I think it's something, hey, trickle down to what we do. You know, I know that what you and Zach just went through was career-wise pretty traumatic, but I think it does allow a bit of perspective. Even someone like me who somehow is in this building, it allows a bit of perspective where you go, you got to make sure you're taking care of number one first. Don't worry about what's popping up on the paycheck. If you're not happy, then what does it really matter? And it seems like Gus at least has that perspective. So I respect the man. I respect the decision that he made. I respect the decision that UCF was going to be forced to make and didn't have to. And now we get to move on with the process.
So I guess the big question now, BK, is who's next? Who do you want? Who's that guy? If you had your ideal pick, is there a guy that you have, or is it just one of those things we're going to have to wait? I saw you never know what to believe in social media. If one guy gets one prediction right, and then the next 90, he's totally wrong. Somebody's like, yeah, UCF already has their guy. What do you know? What can you tell us? What do you think?
Yeah, so you got a couple of options out there. The Tulane head coach, John Summerall, is a guy that's going to be bantered about. They're a top 20 team right now, and this is the beauty of being in the Big 12 is Tulane to UCF used to not be a step up. Now it is, because they're in different levels of college football. I think he fits the personality perfectly. He's in his mid-40s, kind of went through the ranks. He was an OC at Troy, you know, and they've had their success over the years. I don't know a lot about him other than the fact that his career arc is exactly the kind of guy I would have given the stamp of approval to had they hired him in the first place rather than go through the whole Gus experience.
Right.
Will Stein would be another one. He's the OC at Oregon. So, I mean, how much – I guess, well, Dan Lanning is he's more of a defensive mind, so perhaps we should give him some credit. The reason why I pause on that is Oregon has done a really good job of bringing in the top talent, some of the top talent in the country. And so how much of his success is based on the players as opposed to what he's doing? You know, I'm a little more impressed when I see somebody at a school that shouldn't necessarily be succeeding, and yet they are, but still he's a guy based on age and offensive acumen and all of that. I think he would fit perfectly. And then you also have a guy by the name of G.J. Kinney, who I think a lot of people are thinking is going to end up as the next head coach at UCF. He was the OC and quarterback coach for UCF back in 2021. He's at Texas State right now, and I'm hearing a lot of rumors that he could be the next guy. The people that I've talked to say that it's kind of already a done deal, but I'm not willing to go that far just yet. But those would be 3 names I would keep an eye on.
How are things going with the Orlando Magic, man? I know Paolo being out was a little crippling, but man, to be able to see what they've been able to do this year, it's got to be pretty encouraging.
It's crazy because when he went down, you kind of felt this gut punch and we're like, oh yeah, this is why the team was able to be successful last year. They were able to avoid the injury bug. And that is, for Magic fans, that is like every fan base has the thing that has crippled your entire the franchise's existence.
Right.
And injuries is that for the Magic. I mean, you can go back to Penny Hardaway, Grant Hill, and it goes on and on. Gilbert Arenas, like it felt like every time the Magic took one step forward, somebody important would get hurt, and it would derail what their future could hold. Now, last year they were healthy and they took the right strides, and they finished as the 5 seed. And you took Cleveland to a 7th game. It was you kind of hit all the notes that you wanted to hit last year, and being just a little bit better than even the most optimistic fan would think. You roll that into this year, the team picks up right where they left off, and then boom, you get smacked with the Paolo injury and a 2-month timetable on he's not going to be reevaluated for 4 to 6 weeks. And that doesn't mean he's back. That means that's when they'll take a look at his injury for the first time. So it was definitely a gut punch. The team had started hot, and then they lost 5 in a row, and it felt like, man, you didn't even – maybe you realized how good Paolo was, but you realize it even more now. Well, since then, the Magic are 12-1 in their last 13 games. Franz Wagner's been completely unlocked. He has become the guy for this team. He's a legitimate all-star. I think he's going to win Player of the Month for November. That news could come down any moment now, but I would anticipate that he is going to win that award for the Eastern Conference. This team's been incredible, and I think it starts with the head coach, Jamal Mosley. He has instilled an identity of defense, sharing the basketball. And if this team could just start hitting their threes consistently, I legitimately think they're one of the best teams in the NBA, because right now they feel like one of the best teams in the league. They are 30th of 30 teams in three-point shooting percentage. And that's like not being able to throw the football in the NFL and still being 12-1 in your last 13 games. It doesn't compute. And they get to add Paolo Banchero back to the mix, who's a top 15 player in the NBA, and that should happen right around Christmas. So what a present that will be.
It's a beautiful thing, and they're undefeated at home. So I'm sure that you being in attendance has a lot to do with it. 9-0 at home, the only undefeated team at home in the association.
Jay, I feel I'm sorry. I know as somebody who attends every Tampa Bay Lightning game, I know that you can appreciate this. So where we're set up with the radio crew, we're up on the club level. It's like perfect 50-yard line view of the court. You're up a couple of levels. You have that bird's eye view. But to our right is the road radio crew. And every single post-game show that I host, I'm up here gloating, projecting my voice in celebration because I haven't had to break down a loss at home yet.
Yeah,
and
man.
I get these road guys, like they're salty, they're pissed. They have to hop on a plane and go back to whatever sorry city they're from. And I just get to sit there and give out some Papa John's promo code. This is great. It's like I feel a little guilty, but it also feels good.
No, man, listen, the majority of the times we're doing post-game shows, it's usually not great, right? There's been a lot more negative and a lot more of losses that we discuss rather than the win. So enjoy it for as long as you can, brother. It doesn't last forever. Trust me, I know with the Lightning. Oh, yeah, they won back-to-back cups. This is going to happen forever. Then they lose the next year. They can't even get out of the first round now. So, man, Brandon, you are the best. At Brandon Kravitz on Twitter /X, live on In the Zone 3 to 6 96.9 The Game. Let everybody know real quick, 30 seconds, what you got going on with our guy, Zach Blobner.
Yeah, so I had fired up my own podcast feed about a year ago and just been trying to fine-tune what the personality of that is going to be. You know, being in this industry, having a live show on terrestrial radio is not enough. You got to have something else. There are people that don't even listen to live radio anymore, so to have that podcast format that is strictly for those listeners was important. And, you know, this is sort of the gift that is given by the curse of what happened to you and Zach, which was a
Right.
travesty. And I loved listening to your show. You guys were on right before me, so I was able to listen to you in studio before I would go live because I loved the tandem and the stuff that you guys would talk about. I thought that you were, in my opinion, you and Zach were like the future of that's what sports talk was turning into, and I loved it. And I'm trying to do that exact same thing in Orlando. So that when he became a free agent, I said, we're signing that dude. And it is now the Zone Heads podcast with Brandon and Zach. Post a new episode every Wednesday afternoon. So keep it locked for that. We give you covered across the I-4 corridor, everything going on in Orlando and in Tampa. And given everything that happened this weekend, we have plenty of content to get to on Wednesday.
You got it, man. All right, at Brandon Kravitz 96.9 The Game, the Zone Heads podcast with our guy Zach Blobner. BK, I appreciate it, man. I know you got to get ready for your show. We'll talk to you again soon, buddy.
All right, see you, Jay.
All right, good stuff. Brandon Kravitz there from Orlando to the Motor City. Our guy Jim Costa checking in from Detroit. What's going on, brother? How are you?
Hey, Jay, what's up?
Man, listening to the NBA talk with our guy Brandon Kravitz, the Orlando Magic. Who would have thought, man?
Yeah, man. Hey.
A couple of New York and Detroit guys. We're clamoring for the early '90s days again.
There we go. Early 2000s a little bit for the Pistons. Yeah.
You got that right, man. All right, let's start with the big game, man. Michigan and Ohio State. I mean, my goodness, this was a game that I said it the other day on Twitter. I don't have a dog in the race, but it's one of my favorite rivalries. You know, I love Ravens and Steelers. I love Michigan and Ohio State, but to be able to watch that game, the longer that game went on, I know Detroit, Michigan, just everybody up there, they were like, this is too close. You know what I mean? Like everybody's looking at how Ohio State's supposed to blow them out and all this. And then you keep watching that game. And even if like you look away, you're like, it's still tied. I mean, at what point did you really feel like, hey, this could really happen? The upset really could be cooking here.
Yeah, I mean, it's an obsession, this rivalry, right? And the obsession for Ohio State was they were finally going to get the Wolverines. You're 3-touchdown favorites. You got it at your house. It's 365 days ready to lay a beat down on. And when I looked at halftime and it was 10-10, thought, they've got another meltdown in them. Because at the half, Michigan had 10 points. But those two scoring drives were 2 yards and 3 yards. Like Ohio State had let them in. Ohio State had just scored before the half. And it was like, hey, they've let Michigan hang in, and if it gets to the fourth quarter, we've seen how this goes. Wolverines are going to pull away on the ground, and they did, and it's Ryan Day again with a stupid look on his face, 4 straight losses in the rivalry, and I would say that's the most humiliating loss that they've had in some time.
Jim Costa, host of the morning, 6 to 10, 97.1, the ticket up there in Detroit. Listen, I don't know. I mean, can you be unbiased and talk about Ryan Day?
Yeah, well,
like for me on the outside, I'm looking at him and I'm not biased at all. I don't see it. Like if you go to a place like Ohio State, where you look at all of these big time recruits, you have such an incredible backfield. You can get the pick of the litter in so many different places, right? You have all of this money. And then year after year, you just come up short in these big games. And then you pick fights with the Lou Holtzes of the world. And the Jim Harbaugh comment of like starting on third base, like from somebody from the outside, like the more the years go by, you're like, man, Jim was probably right.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like he wants to prove that they're tough. And I don't think they are tough. So they end up with this fake tough bravado thing where Michigan, not a very good football team. The only thing they had going for them is Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant in the middle of their defense. So what does Ryan Day do? Stubbornly runs up the middle over and over. And you've got elite athletes on the outside. They don't have Will Johnson, NFL cornerback. He's not playing. Like, you got to get this out of your head about you're going to be the tougher football team. Go play your ball. Win the game. And they are in his head. And now Ohio State having a Michigan problem. They're also having a Ryan Day problem because I really transparently don't know what they do here. They're going to be in the playoff. They still have a chance to win the national title. But the expectation, and he talked about this, beat Michigan, win the national title. There's casualties if you don't get those things done. So if you're Ohio State, I mean, it's a big buyout, but the standards are high. What you call Vrabel? Marcus Freeman played at Ohio State back in the day. Like, they need an A-level guy. Otherwise, are they just going to run him back? And that doesn't feel sustainable either.
I think Vrabel seems like an NFL guy, but if you would go to college, I mean, Ohio State is one of those jobs where NFL guys look at it and go, right? Like there's got to be 5 or 6 jobs in college where an NFL guy would look at it and go, I really want to be an NFL guy, but that might be a life-changing job, right?
See,
Because as much as we love for Vrabel, right? Good coach with Tennessee, obviously known from his days playing with the Patriots. Is Ohio State that job where he would look at and go, or no? Or do you think he's just going to wait for that next NFL gig?
It does feel like he'll have an NFL offer this offseason.
Right.
And I couldn't fault the guy for saying that's the NFL. It's the highest level. I don't have to deal with NIL and transfer portals and college headaches. My point to you would be if I'm Ohio State and I'm spending $20 million on my roster and that's what I'm getting, I'd hand him 10 to 12, 12 to 13, make him the highest paid coach in the sport and make him say no. And he still may say no. And then if you're Ohio State, you're left scrambling.
Yeah, it's almost like the Danny Hurley thing with the Lakers, right? Like,
yeah.
Nobody thought he was going to leave UConn to go for the Lakers, but it was almost like, all right, go offer him the money, and then you go back and you get a pay raise, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's what you got to play the game. And for so long, I mean, these universities and even these franchises and the pros, like they can, they're the puppet masters, and there's very few times where the players and the coaches, they have that kind of leverage. I think they should do something with that. On the Michigan side, the celebration, obviously, after the game, what was your whole take of how that whole thing transpired? Because that was almost just like another whole aspect of the game. In my mind, it kind of overshadows what the Wolverines did during the victory.
I think it kind of plays into the overall narrative, though, right? It's this idea that Ohio State they got spoiled. They got upset. And Michigan got under their skin again. And that continued even after the game. So, Michigan, they want to plant the flag. To the victor goes the spoils. They want to have their moment. And teams have had that moment at Michigan's expense this season. Texas Longhorns roll in, non-conference, big win early in the season. They plant that flag, and there wasn't a brawl. There wasn't pepper spray. There wasn't macing going on. Michigan had to take the loss, right? I mean, because someone hurts your feelings doesn't mean you're allowed to get physical and erupt. And if you're Ohio State, you had 4 quarters to be the physical team, to win your game, to hold down your field. They lost, and they didn't like that they lost, and they don't like that pit in their stomach again, so it turns ugly and it turns violent. And didn't need to get that way, but it did.
Yeah, and I look at this game for Michigan. How important is that going to be moving forward? Like with Coach Moore, and obviously it's so tough, right? You lose all these players, you lose your coach, you lose kind of your identity. I've actually been kind of, and this is from an outside perspective, I've been kind of impressed with Michigan kind of fighting to keep this whole thing together because they're clearly outmatched. They clearly don't. They're trying to find the quarterback. They have the interior defensive lineman. I've been impressed the way that they've kind of galvanized and played tough in some of these games. That win against USC earlier on this year, I was like, that was some big boy stuff right there. Of course, we're not looking at them as national contenders, but I think in some ways you can tell the real character of a team when they don't have everything going for them. What is your idea of the team kind of this whole season? And then moving forward, how long is it going to take for them to get back to that elite status?
I would say the last 2 weeks have been critically important for Michigan because prior to that, you're staring down a team that, even though they lost guys, still felt like they were underachieving. You got a 12-team playoff. Even if you lose a couple games, you could have been sniffing on the outside, 9-10 wins. That was kind of the preseason expectation, even with the losses. And for them to be staring down, fighting for bowl eligibility 2 weeks ago, it did feel like there was starting to be some sharks circling with Sharon Moore. And I don't think he was ever in danger of being fired, but you know how fans get, and they go, boy, he just kind of inherited the job. He's in over his head. And there were some puzzling decisions in the middle of the season. But the last 2 weeks, beating Northwestern is not a big deal, but putting up 50 points, getting to bowl eligibility, then landing the number 1 recruit in America from your own backyard, Belleville High School, bringing in Bryce Underwood. So now you have a signature recruit. You're playing the NIL game. You're in the modern football. You're bowl eligible. That's okay. But then beating Ohio State 2-0 now for Sharon Moore in the rivalry where these coaches are defined. It feels like in 2 weeks' time, they have a signature recruit, a signature win, real momentum going into the offseason. And instead of being this like mediocre 500 football team, they actually have something to sell their fan base and recruits and revitalize the program.
One thing I love about Coach Moore, and I know we caught a lot of flack from this last year too, is like this guy's emotional, right? Yeah. He bleeds Michigan, right? And I think people on the outside, you'll make fun of it, but if you're a Michigan guy, you get it, right? You get it. You're like, that's the kind of guy I want. Like, he's not like, I'm going to give you some coach speak BS. Like, he's like, dude, I'm here. I'm giving you everything I have. Players going to run through a wall for that. And it kind of is the juxtaposition of him and a guy like Ryan Day, where it seems like it's all fake tough guy stuff. So you could have a better team, but right, you have one guy on one side that's emotional and it seems like his heart's on the right place. And you have Ryan Day where it's like, I'm not buying half the stuff this guy's selling.
Yeah, I mean, for Sherrone, he has to kind of come out of the Harbaugh shadow a little bit, and I think that's been a challenge for year one. But at his core, you're right. Like, the guy played offensive line at Oklahoma. He was the offensive line coach and then the offensive coordinator at Michigan while they were winning the Big Ten titles. He's not new to this. It's not foreign or fake. And, he candidly would tell you that this year wasn't good enough and wouldn't run from that. The standards are high at Michigan, right? He would talk about that all the time. But I think he also understands this rivalry, and I think that's been very clear when he was filling in last year on game day and obviously this season leading up to this game. He had his guys ready to play. They were not going to be a team that could win that game 35-31. They were going to have to win a rock fight. It was going to have to be ugly. They were going to have to hang tough, and they didn't even throw for 100 yards in the game. But they knew TOP, run the ball, make Ohio State make mistakes, dare them to run it, and hope they fall into that trap, and they did. And he outcoached Ryan Day again, and he'll get the last laugh in that.
It's so crazy that happens, right? All these things and questions about Sherrone Moore, and he's out coaching a guy, Ryan Day, who's been pretty much given this fantastic team with all these top tier recruits. You mentioned about expectations. The expectations can't be much higher than for your Detroit Lions up there. Jim, you and I have been talking about them for the last couple of years. It's so cool to see their gradual ascension. And, I asked my buddy Ian Beckles, who I used to do the show with years ago, and who's the one team that you love watching, the team that can really take their game in October, November, December, and take it to January and February. And he says the Detroit Lions. How fun is it to watch a team like the Detroit Lions with Dan Campbell, knowing they're going to run the football? You know what they're going to do. They're going to play that black and blue style. They're going to leave it all out there, and they're going to go and they're going to make you – I used to say this about the Giants, right, for many years. That's one of those teams like you're proud to be a fan of. I feel like the Detroit Lions are that team in the NFL right now. Not the Chiefs, right? It's easy to be the fan of the Super Bowl champs, right? But the Detroit Lions fans out there, because of all of what you went through and because the way and the style that you play, proud to be a Detroit Lions fan. Do you agree with that sentiment?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the fan base here is ignited. They are euphoric. There's bliss. They feel invincible. I would tell you, Lions fans, I mean, you win 10 in a row, even with some of the injuries they've had and some of the challenges, big road games, division games, good teams, and they just keep winning. And to your point, the way they win, it's physical, but it's also creative, right? They're breaking out trick plays. They're involving offensive linemen. So they're fun and they're tough and they're smart. And it's the offense that led the way even last year when they really broke out. And it's the defense that's gotten better this year, even with the Aiden Hutchinson injury. And then it's all tied together in a nice, tidy bow by one of the most likable coaches in sports. I mean, Dan Campbell is a treat for Lions fans. They love this guy. He's ushered in winning that, candidly, they never thought they'd see. I mean, as someone who grew up here, as someone who grew up a Lions fan, like the idea that you'd be talking seriously about the Lions in the Super Bowl and as the Super Bowl favorite, it felt like you always kind of held out a little bit of hope because otherwise, why are you a fan? But it always felt so far away, and now it's right staring them in the face.
Before I let you go, Jim, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little hockey because
here we
that's
go.
my bread and butter. I'm sorry, but you and I have been talking about the Iser plan for the last couple of years, and I texted you earlier this year, kind of giving you a heads up of like just watching the team, and I feel like they should be farther along, and there are some good players on the team, but and we talked about this with Michigan and Ohio State. You got to know your roles, and you have to have players in the right spot. You have to have your coach putting those players in the right spot. Is Dylan Larkin a first-line center? Are these guys around him really the right pieces? Did they do the right thing on the back end? Do they have the right goalie in place? Like, are there any other questions that I was
going to say? Too many questions when you're in your sixth year. And Steve Yzerman has as much rope as a general manager could have for any sport, for any team, because obviously some of it is the emotions of he played in Detroit. He wore the C. You see the iconic photos, him hoisting the Stanley Cup as the leader. And then, of course, in Tampa, being an architect for what they built, and depending on how much credit you want to give, was still down there. And I thought certainly had cut some hockey chops as a general manager and as executive. And everybody knew you were going to have to be patient. He was inheriting a tough situation, handed a really tough spot. And I think everybody has been patient, but then you reach a point where 6 years in, you can't be asking that many questions. I mean, up and down the lineup. I mean, if you're staring at your salary situation going, boy, we don't have much wiggle room, and they're all your guys, and your team's kind of capped out, and you're maybe a playoff team if we're fortunate here in Detroit, Yeah, I mean, there are some real questions, tough questions that nobody wants to ask about Steve Yzerman, but we kind of have to at this point.
No doubt. And again, the one guy you look at is, you're looking at a guy like Al Murray, one of the directors of scouting down here in Tampa. You got to find those 4th, 5th, 6th round guys. You got to find the Kucherovs and the Plots of the world, the Braden Points. He's driving Vasilevsky in the 1st round, of course, right? But you got to get those middle round guys if you're going to be successful. And for your sake, my friend, I hope that happens to you. Jim Costa, the mornings 6-10 there, 97.1 The Ticket up there in Detroit. Jim, I know you're a busy man. It's a busy day for you. Congratulations on all your success. I appreciate your time. We'll talk to you again soon, partner.
Always got time for you, Jay. Appreciate it. Anytime.
Thanks, pal. Jim is the man. Listen, there's not many people that I would go to for Michigan news, whether it's the Lions, Wings, University of Michigan. He is all over it. Wow. That's a lot to take in when it comes to Michigan and Ohio State. What a game. What a game. Rivalry weekend was and I saw our guy, Trevor Sickelman. If you missed the discussion that we had with him last week, it's up on my YouTube page. Go check my YouTube page right now. If you've never seen it before, go like and subscribe. Every subscription certainly helps. When you look back at some of these games, Florida State, for everything that the Gators have been through this year, to finally be able to finish the regular season on a high note, 31-11 victory over the Noles. God, that had to feel good for them, right? Then you're looking at some of these other games. Anytime Ole Miss can beat Mississippi State 26-14, had a bunch of friends at that game. The Georgia game, for a very long time, it was like, all right, Bulldogs, what are you doing here? Do you want to be in the playoff? Are you going to be out? People are already writing up the narrative like, all right, they're going to be in with 3 losses, blah, blah, blah. Then they go 8 overtimes against Coach Key and the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, 44-42. South Carolina, 17-14 to win over there against Dabo Swinney and Clemson. It's just one of my favorite weekends all year long. And again, going back to kind of what Trevor said, that this is better than the championship games or any other weekend. This rivalry weekend, you start looking at some of these games, Arizona State, Purdue and Indiana, Texas and Texas A&M. Longhorns win that one 17-7. Shout out to Rocco Becht and Iowa State beating Kansas State 29-21. There's just so many good football games. And it's always funny when you see just some random games that are in there. It's like Colorado, Oklahoma State. Like, all right. It's just, you kind of throw some of these non-traditional games, these non-rivalry games in there, and it kind of catches you in a weird way. But man, what a great weekend of college football. And it's going to be very exciting to see how it unfolds here over the next couple of weeks. We got the conference championship games coming up, and then the 12-team playoff. College football, man. It's for all of those people that thought expanding from 4 to 12 would just eliminate any type of intensity when it came to these games. Man, was that a wrong narrative to have, because now even more teams feel like they're in it. I was a little concerned too, because the one thing I loved about college football was that one game in October could mean your whole season is completely different. You could be out of the conference championship running. You could be out of the national title race. And I was worried that now some of those games wouldn't mean as much, but it hasn't happened. It's given those teams, I think, outside of the top 4, you look 5, not even to 12, 5 to like 20. And you're looking at those 15 teams, 15, 16 teams, and you're going, okay, they have a chance to pull off an upset. And you're looking at some of these games that are going to be hosted by these home stadiums, playoff type matchups. And you just look, and we'll see it tomorrow night when the rankings come out. Some of these matchups out of conference between the blue bloods of college football. In essence, that's what we want. We want big time matchups. That's what I love about college basketball that I wish we saw more in college football. I love seeing early on in the season Duke play Kansas, or Duke play Kentucky, or North Carolina playing Michigan State. Like, that to me is what college athletics are all about. And even though the conferences have gone kind of wonky, and I do believe ultimately we're going to go to 4 super conferences eventually. You're going to have something out west. They're going to have a Midwest, Northeast kind of thing, the Southeast, and then kind of maybe the Big 12, traditional Big 12 country with Texas, Arizona sliding to the Southwest. How they break it up, that's above my pay grade. But I think eventually they're going to go back to some semblance of a super conference. But this is the type of thing that I love to see when it comes to college football. This is the time of year when I think college football is at its best. Who is always at their best? The one and only Matt Matera, my friend from Pewter Report. What's up, Matty4_Matera? How are you?
I'm doing great, Jay. Thank you so much for having me on the show. And I'm even more fired up here when you talk about college football and college basketball and some of these great matchups that we saw and that we're going to see moving forward. So thanks again for having me on.
Yeah, man. Of course, man. It's always a pleasure. Matty Diamonds, Jake Cobian's calling, man. I love it. I love it, man. Yeah, and listen, it was kind of great because I drove out to JFK yesterday. I left my parents' house. I've been under the weather for the last couple of days, but I'm watching this Bucs game against the Panthers, and we're watching on the way to the airport, going through security. I go through security, and right before I put my phone down, Adam Thielen scores the touchdown to put the Carolina Panthers ahead. When I get through security, the game's in overtime. So I'm like, I don't know how they got I don't know how they drove past down the field. I eventually went back and watched it, but to me, Matt, I think there's a lot of people on this Monday looking at this Buccaneers game and going, I can't believe they did this. They should have done this. They could have done this. I would have done this. I'm looking at it as, hey, you're not always going to have your A game. A lesser Buccaneers team would have lost that game to Carolina. And at the end of the day, a win is a win. Where do you fall?
Yeah, I always like to go back to what Bruce Arians used to say when he was the Bucs head coach, where he's like, you could still learn a lot with a win, and it's better to learn a lot with the win than trying to figure out what went wrong with the loss. So I understand the frustration because there are a lot of things that you could point to that maybe doesn't show that the Bucs are, a Super Bowl contender, even if they get into the playoffs. But on the same side of it, yes, we've seen situations where the Bucs have played lights out and then still found a way to lose, like whether it was the Dirk Cutter days or the late Jameis Winston days as well. So I think you just gotta, we are in the season of thanks and the holiday season. I think you gotta be thankful that you found a way to win and keep your playoff hopes alive, because they would have squandered a fantastic game from Bucky Irving and the Falcons losing to the Chargers. That would have all went away, but thankfully they somehow pulled out a win. Back
to the Bucs in a second. Let's go to the Falcons since you just mentioned them. I was not, and this isn't bias, this isn't hating. I really question when people are crowning teams in the offseason because of what they did in free agency, right? And there was people talking about the Falcons like they were fringe Super Bowl contenders. And I'm going, you got Judon coming off of a season-ending injury, got Kirk Cousins at his advanced age coming off of a season-ending injury. All right, they bring in Simmons, but I was like, that's kind of redundant because you're bringing in arguably another player at the position of your best player on your team in Jesse Bates. And now you look at Cousins throwing 4 interceptions. The pass rush doesn't look any better. I mean, what do you make of the Atlanta Falcons? I always thought all year long that they were fugazi. Oh, yeah, Kyle Pitts had as many catches as you and I did yesterday, Matty 4. Yeah. What do you make of the Falcons? Do you think they can turn this thing around? Because when you look at their schedule compared to the Buccaneers schedule, Bucs is a lot easier than theirs.
I mean, did we not learn our lesson from the year before when the Saints signed Derek Carr? And it was like, oh my God, the Saints are going to be fantastic. No, we saw this play out. Now, are the Falcons a better team with Kirk Cousins than Desmond Ridder? Yeah, of course, obviously. But we're also talking about, you want to talk about injuries, Kirk Cousins coming off an Achilles injury, a guy that has never played his best in the brightest of moments and the brightest of lights. He's not known for really being clutch. His biggest win was against the Bucs. That you liked that game several years ago when the Bucs were terrible. So to see Kirk Cousins play pedestrian and average against everybody but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, it's not exactly shocking. Now, I still do think that the Falcons are a solid team and could end up winning the NFC South based on, the issues that the Bucs have with themselves as a team. But yeah, you mentioned it. The Falcons play Minnesota. That ain't going to be easy. And they also play the Commanders mixed in with a couple of other easier teams. So I think the Falcons can still be a playoff team. That matchup against the Commanders coming up in a couple of weeks will be really big. I don't think the door is closed on them, but they are clearly not the team that many of us expected to be.
A 3-game losing streak. And you look at this team and you look at their weapons on the outside. Again, Kyle Pitts, 0 catches for 0 yards, 2 targets in the game yesterday. Let me guess how many sacks they have. Oh, they actually had 5 sacks yesterday. Is that right? Wow. 5 sacks yesterday. What brought up their total on the season to 15, Matt. They had 10 sacks going into their 12th game. yesterday, and people were telling me that this pass rush is automatically incredible. I'm like, I just don't see it. I know that they have the tiebreaker over the Buccaneers because they won the 2 regular season games, but I have a lot more faith in the Buccaneers down the stretch than I do than the Atlanta Falcons, 100%. And it's because of a game like yesterday. I learned a lot more about the Bucs in that win over the Carolina Panthers than I did the week before against the lowly New York Giants. I mean, when you can win a game, when you don't have your A game, when you don't have your fastball, and you have to carve it up and you have to find ways to come out on top. I mean, no bigger reason than a guy like Anthony Nelson. I mean, you look at a guy, Matt, who just had a baby on Friday, comes in, he's one of the unsung heroes of this team, but Matt, he's a guy that he's only going to play a percentage of snaps. You know, he's a rotational pass rusher, but whether it's a late sack or a late fumble recovery or a late forced fumble, he has a knack for making plays like this.
I was saying that yesterday. You know, Todd Bowles calls him Steady Eddie, and he is Steady Eddie. And I don't know what it is in the air whenever Anthony Nelson comes into a game. Good things just happen. Like, positivity follows Anthony Nelson one way or another. Sometimes it's just as simple as, you know, the offensive lineman screwed up his blocking assignment and Anthony Nelson's a free runner and he gets to the quarterback, but screw it. It still counts as a sack or a big play or whatever you want it to be. But that was all heart and hustle by Anthony Nelson, you know, on that strip sack of Chuba Hubbard. Of course, Yaya Diaby is the one that picked it up. And I don't know how you felt, but I thought Yaya was a little too nonchalant trying to go after the football when, like, your season is on the line. But he got it anyway, so that's a story for another day. And Anthony Nelson played more in this game because, remember, they didn't have Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. He did not play with an ankle injury. I'm curious if JTS was available for the game. Is Anthony Nelson even in that moment? Does JTS make the same play? And I'm not here to compare JTS and Anthony Nelson, but just, man, what a great play. That might be the play of the season for the Buccaneers up until this point, because if they lose that game to Carolina, sure, they still have a chance to get into the postseason. You still have a chance maybe to catch the Atlanta Falcons, but that would have been close to a dagger to Todd Bowles in his coaching career. But Anthony Nelson makes the big play, and here we are talking about a Bucs win.
Yeah, you got to keep your foot down on the gas pedal, and you have an opportunity to win the game like you did yesterday. Yeah, I'm with you. And on the Yaya play, it seemed like he was caught in between of, like, I know the right thing is to fall on the football, but I think I have some space to pick up the ball. That was a guy that in his head, you could tell was definitely trying to rationalize. And Bryce Young really didn't dive in for that football. I mean, it's kind of making you remember of Cam Newton. You know, pull the Cam Newton there. You know, Baker Mayfield ain't doing that. You know, Baker Mayfield is going to do whatever it takes. He's going to dive even to his own, even to, you know, going against what's better for his body. How nervous were you yesterday when you saw him leave the game? Because anytime you see a quarterback stay down for as long as he did, it's very rare that you're going to see him come back. The news looked okay because it was just somebody stepped on his foot there. But, man, I know I was worried when they started panning the camera to Kyle Trask, and it looked like it was going to be Trask's season.
Yeah, by the way, Baker Mayfield would have ripped off his shoulder to extend his arm to get the fumble before he let the other team get the fumble. But, yeah, it was very scary when it came to Baker's injury, because as soon as he got tackled, he immediately – at first I thought he was going for his knee, but clearly it was more of an ankle thing. When you see – any player at any position grab like a lower body situation, whether it's a knee or an ankle, you're thinking, oh my God, like torn ACL, torn MCL, like whatever the case may be. I mean, Christian McCaffrey yesterday just slid down right away, and you're immediately thinking the worst in that Bills 49ers game. And then Kyle Trask comes in, and I'm thinking, all right, well, yeah, Baker's done for the game, hopefully not done for the season, because that means it's the end of the Bucs season. And lo and behold, Baker's just right on the sideline, right again, ready to get back in. Wasn't a great first play back in when he threw the interception. But, I mean, this is what this Bucs team is. They embody the heart, the soul, the mentality that Baker Mayfield has. I mean, he wants to win more than, like, Bucs fans want the Bucs to win. He just – it's an old-school mentality a little bit. It's certainly gritty because he didn't have things going his way yesterday, but then still found a way to tie it up at the end in the fourth quarter. I mean, how do you not love watching Baker Mayfield play? I know you don't love the interceptions and things like that, but the heart and the hustle – just not everybody has that, and you got to respect it.
No, 100%. He's a guy that you love cheering for because, you know, in a sport where sometimes I think guys look at it, and unfortunately we have examples, right? We just saw the Devin White thing, right? And these guys that are getting paid millions of dollars and a lack of effort and getting called out, like you never, ever, ever have to question that with Baker Mayfield. And it's one thing when a guy does that, but it's another thing when you can tell there's tangible evidence that it rubs off on his teammates. And you listen to the way that they speak about each other and going back to the Anthony Nelson thing, and you watch the video that the Buccaneers put out on their social media of Anthony Nelson coming into the locker room and how excited Levante David and Tristan Wirfs and this whole team was for him. That is the sign of a great team. And that's a sign of a team that has bonds, team that is together, because you see this in any aspect of life. And I saw it, recently with what happened to me in my profession. When other people show an outpouring of emotion towards you, whether it's happiness, whether it's compassion, I mean, it shows you kind of like what your character is through other people. So for everybody to be, they weren't just excited that they won the game. They were excited that Anthony Nelson was the guy that did that. So that speaks volumes of this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team. And as much as we look at Baker Mayfield as the guy that kind of does that, I think Todd Bowles deserves a lot of credit for that. And it's an intangible thing. You only see it sometimes in behind the scenes type videos, but I know a lot of people want to, and you mentioned it too. Some people were going to be calling for Todd Bowles' job, or, they're always going to throw him to the wolves when things go bad. But what are some of the things that Todd Bowles does in a positive way that doesn't get enough credit when it comes from the fan base?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I think one of the main things that Bucs fans get annoyed with when it comes to Todd Bowles is seeing his stoic nature on the sideline. He's not really like freaking out about anything or really showing too many emotions. And Todd has explained it, sometimes off camera, sometimes on camera, but he's explained it as, football is a high stakes game. There's a lot of emotions running high. I mean, we see crazy penalties happen. We see, you look at college football, the flag planting, and everybody's, more chaotic after the game than in the game itself. But Bowles keeps that stoic manner, or that calm manner, I should say, because he doesn't want to show any panic, because people might think if your head coach is panicking, well, then the rest of the team is going to panic. Right. I just think behind the scenes, he finds a way really to, tap into his players and see what works for them, what doesn't work for them. I know Devin White's not here anymore, but Devin White would talk about Todd Bowles like he's a father figure. I know he's got a great relationship with Levante David. I still go back to Will Golston early on when Todd Bowles was here, and Will Golston was like, Todd Bowles is a guy that you want to run through a brick wall through for. And so, he's got the guys' backs on defense. But I think Todd's kind of, I don't want to say carefree, but like he'll talk a lot of smack in practice. He's very sarcastic. I think his way to kind of like show that you can humanize things in football has been very important for him, because he had the bad losing streak last season. You had a 4-game losing streak this year. And as we've seen around the league, other teams would start pointing fingers. Other teams would start kind of breaking down, saying this season is done. But that hasn't happened with the Bucs 2 years in a row. And Todd Bowles deserves that credit. If you want to scrutinize his timeout usage, certain things on the defense that, have been used or haven't been called, that's fine. But he hasn't lost the locker room when I think a lot of other situations the locker room would have been lost. And he forms special relationships with his players that isn't seen on camera, but it's helped the Bucs win.
Bucky Irving was fantastic in this game against the Carolina Panthers. And when you look at like yards from scrimmage and what he's been able to do this year, and you're putting him up there with guys like Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry, and you're going, damn, man, this isn't just a good year for a rookie. This is a really good year for any type of running back. Just to see that kid grow, what's his ceiling when it comes to his role with this Tampa Bay Buccaneers and kind of in the hierarchy when it comes to running back and backs in the NFL?
I think Bucky Irving can be a star. Now, is he going to be like, a top 3 running back in the league? I don't necessarily know. But, there are only a couple of running backs in this league currently where when they have the football, I'm just thinking, wow, something special is going to happen, or they're going to be off to the races. And right now, I think it's Saquon. I think it's Derrick Henry, obviously, when he has the ball. I would say it's a healthy Christian McCaffrey when he's all set, but that hasn't been the case this year. Bucky, I can't put in that category just yet. And I don't know if he has the full breakaway speed. He gets to the 3rd and 4th level, but he doesn't always break it for touchdowns. But I get a little bit of that feeling when I watch Bucky Irving. He just hits the hole right away. He makes everybody miss. and he's always going forward. He never gets tackled backwards. He always gets tackled forward. So if it's a 4th and inches, you know he's going to get it because he always gets tackled forward. He has excellent vision. I actually think Sean Tucker has the best vision on this team, but Bucky Irving does a great job of just finding the hole, hitting it right away. He's great as a receiver as well, as we've seen the past couple of weeks. I think the sky is the limit for Bucky Irving, and I think it's great that the Bucs committed this week to Bucky Irving is our main rusher. He had 25 attempts and clearly paid off with 152 yards and that touchdown. Just keep feeding Bucky, and that doesn't mean that Rachaad White isn't important to this team. He just has a different role. So I think Bucky Irving really can be a star.
And Rachaad White showed in overtime that big run right before the game-winning kick from Chase McLaughlin. And it's a good job by Liam Cohen. And I still think Liam Cohen has room to grow as well. Some of his play calls in the red zone, I think, leaves a little bit to be desired. Not an easy – I mean, he said it himself before week 1. 3 running back system is not an easy thing to handle because you have to try to keep what do you do? One drive. And sometimes you only call one play. How can you tell how good a guy is if he's only running the ball one time and you threw it the other 2 or 3 times? So I understand that with Liam Cohen, but I'm excited about the prospect of this team moving forward because there's a good vibe about them. I feel like they're looking around and they're playing, when they do well, they're playing complementary football, defensively, offensively, special teams outside of, I don't know what Trenton Gill was doing, but Chase McLaughlin makes the big kicks when he has to. I know it was a tough miss in overtime, but that was a huge kick at the end of regulation. Every little bit, like every single player played their part in that victory over the Carolina Panthers. Is there an unsung hero or one storyline that people are kind of missing when it comes to that win over Carolina?
Unsung hero. I mean, I think everyone knows Tristan Wirfs, but him battling and being able to play, I think was super important. I think the offensive line, really the way that they blocked is a story in of itself, because in my opinion, and I do tend to sway more positive than negative in certain situations. Part of me, though, looking at this game, thinks that there were a couple of heroes that saved the day. I think it was Bucky Irving, obviously. It was Anthony Nelson, obviously. Mike Evans and the Bucs offensive line. I think those guys really saved the day for the Bucs, and everyone else was kind of pedestrian. So I look at the offensive line, just the overall turnaround of a group that was dead last for 2 years in a row running the football. And now the running game is the strength of this offense. I mean, how could it not be when the receivers, you get Mike Evans, who balled out, and loved what I saw from Mike. But outside of that, it's very pedestrian contributions from the rest of the group, where the offensive line is anchoring this team. Of course, Bucky Irving, of course, Rachaad White as well. But Tristan Wirfs battling through that knee injury, coming back, not missing too much time, and playing really well. I think, obviously, he's not unsung. Everybody knows Tristan Wirfs. But that was one of the storylines that, for me, caught my attention.
I like some of the bubble screens for Sterling Shepard, and I think the catch Sterling Shepard made right before the game-tying field goal was one of those under-the-radar things. Is Sterling Shepard going to be replacing Chris Godwin? No. But there's going to be certain plays where his veteran guile kind of pays off, and I think we saw that a little bit against Carolina. I know there's going to be some frustrating plays as well, but I think he's kind of proven his worth a little bit in big-time situations for this team. Did you see Survivor Series?
I watched the main event. I only saw the main event.
All right, so I'm bringing you in. I'm going to bring in Eddie Encina in here with us. I'm bringing
What's
in
up,
Ed,
Eddie?
Big Ed, because he's feeling oozy. So bringing in, this is a special Survivor Series edition at the end of Matt's appearance here in the beginning of Ed's. Ed, what's going on, buddy? How are you?
What's going on, fellas? Good to see you, Matty.
It's you guys feeling oozy today.
To see you too, man.
It's actually funny because I haven't worn this sweatshirt I don't know how long because it hadn't been cold enough. So I knew I was coming on with you, so I was like, I should rock the OG bloodline from a couple years ago.
Yeet all day, buddy. All right, we'll start with you, Ed. Then for the main event. What did you think of the main event? Bloodline, the OG Bloodline goes over Bloodline 2.0. What were some of the big things that stood out to you about that main event?
So, it's all about kind of the buildup, right, with these things. And, I honestly was over the course of this, I kind of got a little bit tired of some of the buildup because I just kind of got tired of, Solo and the new Bloodline just kind of kicking Roman's ass all the time. So the John Heyman part of the Paul Heyman part of this not John Heyman.
Look
Paul
at the baseball guy.
Yeah, I mean,
Baseball
I love
roots.
baseball.
Nothing to do with this. But the Paul Heyman part of it's always just, I mean, we talk about this all the time, Jay, is like that dynamic and what he brings and everything like that, that just made it, right? And then you bring in CM Punk and everything like that. And I was wondering where they were going to go with it until then. And obviously it made for a really good main event at Survivor Series. I thought that, I was actually watching it live while covering the game the other day on my phone. So I had the sound down, so I couldn't hear the play-by-play. I actually not till I went back home and watched it on a replay. But yeah, I thought it was cool. I think that, and also the other thing is, and this is one thing that they've been so good at recently, is, that you can kind of see the next level of the storyline play out, right? And it can go in so many different directions. And I was honestly wondering that going in is, how much more different ways can they take this now? Because they've gone so long, and I know we all remember that press conference where what they said they were like in the third inning, right? Of it. And now you look at it like, you can really believe that there's still some meat on this bone beyond just like these two factions clashing. But like, I'm a big OG Bloodline guy. I'm a big part of Yeet Nation. So, I mean, I love it. I roll with it. I like what I see. And I thought it was pretty cool the other night. And also to remember that Jey Uso and Sami Zayn are now 3-0,
right,
in Survivor Series 5-on-5. So.
Yeah, I mean, insane. Matt, what'd you think of the main event?
Yeah, overall, I liked it. And my wrestling fandom, I think, is kind of different than most. Like, I'd rather watch a sick promo where two guys are like dissing each other the whole time, just as much as like a really good match. And I kind of like the hardcore, bring out the tables and stuff like that. I enjoy that as much as just like, you, me, WrestleMania, middle of the ring, like one-on-one. So I always like all the chicanery that comes with it.
Right.
At first, I felt bad for Jimmy a little bit because, like, Sammy comes out and it's a huge roar, and he's Canadian, they're in Canada, I get it. And then Jimmy comes out, and everyone's just kind of like, okay, like whatever. So I was happy that Jimmy got his moment later on when he jumped off the cell.
I thought,
like,
listen, I'm going to interject real quick. I totally agree with you. I thought he was the low-key all-star of that match. Because he did a Jeff Hardy Whisper in the Wind off the top.
Yes, he did.
He did the splash off the top, what looked good. All of the things that he did, I thought it was probably his best in-ring performance than I think I've ever seen. Their WrestleMania match wasn't great. They got their time cut. It didn't look fantastic. And they both knew that. And good thing that they were able to come out the next night and do all they had to do during the big time match with Cody and Roman. But I thought that was the best performance I've ever seen from Jimmy Uso in the ring. But I'm with you, Matt. And especially after it was a respectful like applause and entrance because him interjecting the storyline. But he isn't near the level of a Jey Uso because Jey Uso is really become its own thing with the Yeet, and he came out last. Exactly. Jey Uso came out last, like after CM Punk, after Roman Reigns, Jey Uso came out last, and nobody batted an eye. They were like, hey, if anything, you were just like, that has shown how Jey has come up through this entire storyline, and I hope that what we saw Saturday is going to help Jimmy, because if you listen or you watch anything, Jimmy's like the comedian of the group. Like he is the guy that keeps everybody together, like in the family. He's hilarious. And if we can see a little bit more of that as a babyface on TV, I think you can start getting him up to that main event level like we saw from his brother Jey.
Yeah, like even his entrance music, it doesn't pop the way that like everyone else in the bloodline does. So I mean, it's got to be tough a little bit. Like, it's your twin brother, and I'm sure there's some, like, I'm very happy for Jey, but it's clearly, like, Jey is a star, and Jimmy's kind of still, like, the guy that walks out with Roman as Roman's, maybe not lackey at this point because he's a good guy. But the match, so I was happy for Jimmy. The match itself, I thought was good. I don't think it's going to land in history as, like, one of the greatest matches in Bloodline history. It was good for what it was. And I think part of it is everybody was like expecting a swerve or a big turn or The Rock's going to come out. And it's almost like the swerve and the surprise was that there wasn't a swerve and a surprise. That it was just a straight up match. The good guys beat the bad guys, or however you want to view each side of it. And because there wasn't a swerve, like that was almost the surprise in of itself. I will say at the end when it was just like Solo and his Denzel Washington moment in Training Day, being like, all right, like, let's get this over with. I did think for a second, the way that they all circled, that Solo was going to like nod at one of the guys and then they were going to start beating up Roman, but that didn't happen. And then CM Punk with the favor. What's the favor? What's it going to be? Are they going to explain it next show? Is it going to be a thing down the road where we're going to go, oh yeah, remember that time? But overall, it was fun. I enjoyed it. I didn't think it was like out of this park fantastic, but we were entertained, and that's what the E stands for, right?
You got that right. And I want to piggyback on what you just said. I was really hoping The Rock was going to be there last night or Saturday. That didn't happen, so it was a little bit of a letdown. I thought it was a little weird that Seth Rollins wasn't involved at all because, they were teasing that. No Cody and KO on the show was kind of weird. Like, you don't have your world champion. I get,
we got to put on a show for Long Island.
Yeah, no, I understand that. But it was just, there was something missing. I thought it was really good. I wouldn't say I thought it was really good, bordering on great, but it wasn't fantastic. I'm with you, Matt. It wasn't like mind blowing. I thought there was one point where Sammy might have turned on the OG bloodline. There was a moment where he was in the middle of the one ring, and I go, oh no, is Sammy going to turn on these guys? That didn't happen. I did like that there was a official, like a handshake between CM Punk and Roman Reigns, because just show me some kind of mutual respect and move on. Like, eventually, like the hard ass act, like I like that he stopped CM Punk from going out into the, leaving the cage. He let Sammy go, call him back to what he did last year. And then CM Punk kind of shouldering Roman as he goes to the ring as the fourth guy. But once you keep doing that and then there's no blow off, it's like, all right, you're on the same side, shake hands and move on. And I think that's what we saw. I don't think that the favor is going to be with the bloodline. I think it's going to be outside the bloodline. Maybe it's a world title shot against Gunther or somebody like that, where Paul Heyman will pull the strings. I don't think that CM Punk needs to be involved with the bloodline storyline anymore. That's the reason why I'm glad Cody's out of it. That you still got other family members that just got signed to the WWE that we haven't seen yet. And The Rock is still waiting as the final boss. So, Matt, I'll ask you this before we let you go. What do you think is the next step in the bloodline? And then Ed, I'll ask you that same thing before we talk some Lightning hockey.
Oh, that's a good question. I get a little hazy with the details because I don't watch like every single week. I try to, but I mean, have we gotten just Roman versus Solo, like just one-on-one?
I don't think so. Right, Ed?
Not really. No. I mean, it comes down to Ulafala now, right? I mean,
the next,
basically, right?
Yeah, so I think that's got to be the next one. But when do you do it? Because you're not going to do it at WrestleMania if you got Roman versus Rock. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, yes, maybe that's Saturday night main event level there. What about you, Ed? What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, like you guys both pointed out really well, is like the Jimmy part of this is really, really interesting. And I think that, the one thing that kind of came full circle with all this is, as we mentioned here, is that like these guys all needed each other at one point, right? And now they kind of agreed, even though they really kind of have all gone out on their own to a certain degree, or turn their backs on each other to a certain degree, that they can come together. So, I'm just looking forward to a bunch of like even some singles matches with some of these guys where we get a bunch of interferences and a whole bunch of crap goes on that leads to different plot lines. But I do agree that like the Jimmy aspect of it, and like you said, he is the funny dude. If you ever see his social and anything that he puts up, like he is really like the big personality of that group. And hopefully, that we get to see some of that with this next, inning or layer of that. So, sorry, my voice, I've been drinking tea. It sounds like Triple H here, but
it's time to play the game.
Anyway, go ahead.
I love it, man. All right, Matt, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much for talking some Buccaneer football and some wrestling as well. Matty4_Matera. Check out the guys at Pewter Report, pewterreport.com. Appreciate you, brother. Talk to you again soon.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for having me on. Ed, good to see you. Hope you're doing well. And talk to you guys soon.
Good to see you, buddy. Thanks, Matt. All right. Eddie in the yard. Eddie, are you going to change your handle to Eddie in the rink or Eddie on the ice or something, or no?
I don't know, because I think people are going to forget who I am I'm afraid,
Yeah, I'm sure there's
a lot of
Encinas covering hockey. You're right, buddy.
You don't want to make it too complicated on people on social media,
You got that right. Yeah, like the storylines for WWE for sure. Any other matches stand out to you from the pay-per-view before we get into some hockey?
I mean, I like the women's.
They thought they did a good job, man. I really did. I love Io Sky. She's a beast.
Yeah, and her game is like almost made for that. You know what I mean?
It is.
So much, and whether it's that or ladder matches, anything crazy, like she just takes it to the next level. So I like that one. Like I'm a big Priest guy, so like the whole Priest Gunther storyline, I was here and there with a little bit, but obviously we're going to see another round of Priest, Balor.
Yeah. Do you want to see that? I don't want to see that though. I feel like they have nowhere to go. That's the problem. They're recycling the story. They do such a good job, and I think this happens in any wrestling company, but it seems like when you can't, you're looking around, you're trying to find like, where's the next step for the new Judgment Day, right? You get a lot of even sized people. There's no big guys, which the biggest person in that group is Raquel Rodriguez. Like, what kind of sense does that make? Tag team titles, they've been defended, I think, twice in 2 or 3 months. That storyline's fallen flat. So now you just put him back with Priest. Priest and Gunther, was that a great, it's weird. Where do you go? There's a lack of development when it comes to the Judgment Day and all that, all the spider web with that.
Well, it's almost that they've killed once they killed the quote unquote leadership of it, right? That now they're all just kind of this even keel. And like, they had Dom on this meteoric kind of rise,
right?
And now he's kind of just sitting there.
He's plateaued,
with the rest of them. And I think one of the best things that they've done in the past 5 years is what they've done with Dom Mysterio. And I remember watching him with his dad and watching him being like, I just don't, I'm just really not really into this,
No.
But then he bought into the heel, and that heel turn was one of the best ones I think we've seen in a while. And but I mean, I think we're going to see probably eventually we're going to see a super match between the powers that are, Rhea and Raquel Rodriguez at some point. I'd like to see her be more than just kind of a, lack of a better term, lackey in that group too. I think she can do really big things that she's never really had an opportunity to. I know she's hurt too, but yeah, I mean, the other thing is the changing over the U.S. title, because we've had LA Knight on this he was finally going to get his title and be more than just the guy, and then Shinsuke comes out. I'm not really into Shinsuke's the shtick and everything like that he's put out, but man, he can wrestle. He can fight. But so it'll be interesting to see how long that kind of lasts and where that goes. I'm a little bit intrigued by it. Not so much interested in it, but intrigued by it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I've always liked Shinsuke. I just feel like they run out of. This is where managers need to make their way back.
Right.
There's certain guys that they can connect, but they need a voice. They need a mouthpiece. And imagine Shinsuke and being in the group with 2 or 3 other guys with one manager and letting somebody talk up Shinsuke and all his winning around the world and how he trains MMA with Lyoto Machida and Daniel Bryan. Those are 3 best friends. There's a lot of storylines where I think sometimes you go too far away. And we saw that when they went away from factions for a really long time before they brought them back.
One other thing too, is I do think that Ludwig Kaiser had a big kind of moment for himself.
Yeah.
He's never been kind of his own guy in Imperium. And then, I honestly don't even know how he got involved in that triple threat, but Breaker's a beast, we all kind of know that, and Sheamus is Sheamus. And I think he had some really big moments there where you can kind of look at him as maybe this guy that, more than just, kind of the side man for Gunther.
Yeah.
He's by far, I think he has a lot of talent, and he can do a lot of things. I mean, so it's interesting. There are a little bit some doors opening from that event that, maybe some people will get a little bit more shine put over, as our boy Ric Flair would say.
That's right. Ludwig Kaiser, he's doing pretty well for himself. He's also dating Tiffany Stratton. So, I mean, he could be doing a lot worse. The Tampa Bay Lightning, let's get to them. Man, kind of a crazy game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. I flipped it on and I was like, holy smokes, what is going on with these guys? Goal after goal. The final score was a lot more respectable than it was, but you start seeing who wasn't in the lineup for that game. What are your thoughts on the play of the Lightning over the last couple of games, and should we be concerned about Nikita Kucherov's injury?
Yeah, I think that, when you look at the Kucherov injury, obviously that makes a huge impact when you're without your best player, one of the best players in the league. And I think that we saw, like, I've looked at that injury many times, and it's hard to really kind of tell what happened there. It certainly looks like a lower body injury of some extent, but I do think that, in a situation like this, and this is one thing that Lightning have always done, is, take a conservative approach with injuries, especially in a time when certain times in the schedule will allow it. And,
right.
Even though, you're right there when you look at the standings, if the Lightning got 2 points out of that game, they're right there with the Leafs, and if you look at a lot of these games, especially some of the most recent ones at home, these might be games that they look at down the road and be like, oh man, if we'd gotten a point there, gotten 2 here, that they could be in a better spot down the road. But they always have that, I know it's overused with process under outcome take, and I think they do with injuries too, whether it's giving Vasilevsky an extra, day of rest, or if he doesn't skate in the morning skate or something like that. And so to not see Kucherov in the game the other night, I don't think is worrisome. Now, if he's not in the game on Thursday in San Jose, or not in practice the next couple of days when they come back to the ice tomorrow, then I think there's some level of concern there. We all know how tough Nikita Kucherov is. We all know what it's going to take for him to miss a game, let alone to be told that he has to miss a game. So, we all know that. But going back to the game itself, the other night, and this is something that teams wrestle with, especially in this time of the year. Like everyone kind of talks about, you want to find what you are as a team, come holiday season, right? Like Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year. And this team is really still trying to find itself in terms of its 60-minute play. And I think you saw that. You've seen it, honestly, in the past few home games. The Toronto game, they're down by 1 going after the first period. They allow those 2 bad goals, in a 30 second span. Like no NHL player should be allowed as much space as Chris Tanev had on that first goal in the second period. So they just have a problem with overloading sometimes. We've seen it many times. But obviously, they go down 4-0, and in the room, a lot of the talk was about, the fight they showed, but they never should have been in that situation anyway. Obviously they're about Kucherov, you're about Nick Paul, who's been a big time player for him. Mitchell Chafee does a lot of, dirty work for them. Hopefully you get those guys back soon, but you can't bank on it, right? You've got to play as if you're not going to get them back. And I think that when you look at that game, you look at the Capitals game where, they had a 2-0 lead in that game after 1 period, a 3-2 lead after 2, and just kind of lost control of it. And even the Dallas game, they go into it, tied 2-2, and then they, lose that one 4-2. And these are games at home, like these are games that we're used to seeing, no matter the ups and downs of what the Lightning might have, throughout the season, that you can always trust that they're going to pull out games at home late. And so I think that's one thing that's a little bit concerning. But again, the injuries are a major part of this, especially when it comes to not having Nikita Kucherov.
Yeah, and I'm looking at this team as a whole and looking at, the defensive structure and, what would you make of the guys on the blue line? Because I really like what I've seen from JJ Moser. When they're giving up these goals, giving up these leads, or, blowing it at the end, do you think it's more on the guys on the blue line or the overall defensive structure of the whole team?
Yeah, I think it's overall. It's easy to kind of, like, when you look at the goals and it's like you see the guy who's trailing or missed an assignment. But I honestly think their blue line's a lot better than it was last year. I love what JJ Moser brings. And as you can see, he can be used in a lot of different places. He can be on that right side with Hedman, which he's fit in really well, which isn't an easy thing to do because Victor Hedman plays so much different. I just lost my light here. But Victor Hedman plays so many different, like he plays up into play so much. But then, he can also be a right side guy on the third pairing. Darren Radich has had a lot of time up with Hedman recently on that first pairing, which is where he was last year. And then with Chernak and McDonough, those guys you just have faith in the solid, hard-nosed play that those two guys had play, and they've just kind of picked up from day one with that. So I do think that they kind of got to figure out what they want to do with that third pairing. I've said it a couple times, as Perbix and Radich are guys you need to play, and when you're kind of moving them in, Lilleberg for that matter too, and You know, when Lilleberg played with Max Crozier, they were really good together, and they had a chemistry that you know, few young players have as NHL defensemen. Obviously, that went back down to from their AHL days together last year. But I like the blue line as it is. Like, I just think it's all of it structural. I just think that, you know, when you look at the forward lines that are getting scored on, a lot of the times it's some of the same ones, you know. And, you know, last year, that first line is as great as it is offensively, it really kind of lacked, you know, defensively. And this year they had a great start. I thought they were all, you know, all three of those guys are really, you know, I think Gensel adds a different dynamic because he's so responsible both sides of the puck. But recently, I think we've seen a little bit of lapsing there. And, you know, sometimes it all comes down to a turnover at the blue line. Yeah. And, you know, you're running the other way. But I think the one thing is that Cooper said a couple times is that, you know, even though, you know, they're allowing some chances, and the chances that they're allowing are bad ones, is that, you know, it's for the most part that it's not the volume that maybe they've had, you know, in the past. And, you know, at the end of the day, you know, if Vasilevsky, you know, bails you out a few times, you know, it really doesn't matter too much. And he's been able to do that for the most part. I think that there's been a lot of, especially recently, there's been some goals that he definitely would have liked to have had back. But, you know, for the most part, I think he's been, you know, pretty stable there.
What's your kind of forecast for Nick Paul? Do we know how long he's going to be out for?
Well, he skated the other day, so he's back on the ice, which is a good sign. And again, the team's been off. Team's off yesterday and off today. So I think if we see him on the ice tomorrow, that's a really good sign, because you get him, you give him a couple of days to get back in terms of in time for Thursday. I mean, again, from looking back on that play, it looked like another, like, kind of a leg muscle injury of some sort. He just kind of pulled up, what was that, 6-7 games ago. So you never really know with those, but I would say that if he wasn't back by the first couple games of that West Coast trip, that I'd be surprised. I think that's kind of the aim there, is that he'll be back for the beginning of that West Coast trip, which begins what would that be, Sunday in Vancouver. Yeah.
Damn, man, got a little West Coast trips, man. It is that time of year. Follow him on Twitter /X at Eddie in the Yard. Check him out. Tampa Bay Times, Tampa Bay Lightning Insider, our guy Eddie NNNNN Eduardo NNN Encina. You are the man, buddy. I appreciate you. Have a great rest of your week. Say hello to your better half, and we'll talk to you again soon, boss.
Will do. Thanks for having me, Jay.
You got it, pal. The one and only Ed Encina. All right, a big thank you to everybody that joined us on the program today, including my guy Ian Beckles, Nathan Bond, Brandon Kravitz, Jim Costa, Matt Matera, and of course, the one and only Ed Encina. Follow me on all social media platforms at JRecher. That's Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok. I am everywhere, and hope you'll follow me there too. Like and subscribe here on YouTube. Every like and subscription certainly does help. And if you want to advertise with the JRecher podcast, we are going live daily, Monday through Friday, starting in January. I'll let you know the official start date here in the next couple of days. But for now, for the rest of 2024, we'll be live on Mondays and Fridays. So hopefully we will see you there. All right, I'm back in action on Friday. Hope to see you again right here on the JRecher podcast. I am gone. Peace out.